This is my third of these sessions. So last month I did a couple of these going deeper meditation sessions where I did essentially the Metta Bhavana or the Brahma Viharas. And Sandeep asked me last week, there was a gap, and would I lead tonight? So I thought, well, since I've done the Metta Bhavana, let's do the mindfulness of breathing. And I wanted to cover it in relation to the Buddhist teaching of emptiness, because this has always been significant to me, as I'll explain in a moment. So I associate emptiness with mindfulness of breathing at the moment, because when that is now, after being a Buddhist for 20 odd years, is that when there is emptiness and the mind doesn't give a lot of stuff to follow, the experience of the body becomes heightened, and you become aware of the body as something incredibly precious. And so you can just sit in meditation or not in meditation with a sort of a peaceful awareness of the breath and your gently beating heart. So for me, the breath is very closely associated with emptiness. So I do have some things to say, slightly ironically, because of course emptiness is to be experienced and there's not much going on, at least not cognitively. But anyway, something I said in the introduction is, so there's widespread kind of interest at the moment in secular mindfulness. It's used a lot in therapy, helping people. And that seems to have the Buddhism kind of stripped out of it. And one of the founders of the movement, Jon Kabat-Zinn, wrote in one of his books, and I'll just quote, "So mindfulness will not conflict with any beliefs, religious or for that matter scientific, nor is it trying to sell you anything, especially not a belief system or an ideology." Now, I'm not an expert on secular mindfulness, and I'm hoping that it's very useful to people. But what I can speak from is my personal experience, where I've essentially done mindfulness practice as a Buddhist for the most part. And in my experience, it could be risky. It would have been risky, in fact, for me to have done secular mindfulness. And I explain why. So the first time I ever meditated was in a school classroom, of all things. When I was 14, I was living in South Africa. The teacher we had, he was slightly unconventional, but he was having trouble controlling the class, so he just gave us a meditation. And the second time was when I went to a beginner's class in the Triratna. It was led by an order member called Saccacitta in Utrecht in Holland, where I was living at the time. So I was 24 then. So both of these kind of first experiences I had of meditation, I was not yet a Buddhist. Okay, so I'm stressing that because I don't feel like I was guided in any way to what happened. It was kind of a beginner sitting down, being told to meditate on the breath. Yeah, I knew nothing of Buddhism at that time, and yet both times. So this was when I was 14 and when I was 24. I sort of came out at the end of the meditation when the bell rang, slightly kind of alarmed, like, what just happened? It was like that whole period just seemed absent. It was a bit like, when you go to bed at night and then you wake up in the morning and you haven't had a dream that you can remember. There's just nothing. It's like unconscious for that amount of time. That's how it felt to me at the time. It wasn't unpleasant. In fact, I remember when I was 24, at least at the end of the evening when I walked out, I thought, this is what I've been looking for. and I just knew I was going to practice meditation the rest of my life. It was sort of as clear as that. But it was confusing, and it didn't get any easier for a while either. So let me just see what I was planning to say. So the first time when I was 14, it was also confusing to me. I didn't understand what had happened, and I just sort of pushed it aside. I wasn't in a position to explore it any further, and I just forgot about it. I only remembered it years later. The second time, when I was 24, obviously I'd gone along to a Buddhist class, so I started studying the Dharma, the Buddhist teaching, and there was a Sangha in Holland that I could develop and go on retreats on, that sort of thing. But it took me a couple of years to kind of stabilize again. And in that time, what I needed to do was make certain changes in my life. I needed to, I was smoking too much dope at that time, marijuana. And so I needed to get that under control. So that, there were a number of things I needed to change in my life. But in that period, I basically suffered from delusions. One of them was I thought I was some kind of spiritual giant, perhaps like Jesus or something. And another one I can remember was I thought that the walls would shake if I didn't control very anxious thoughts that I had. So who knows how I'd kind of cope with this experience, this first experience really of emptiness, if I didn't have a Buddhist context where I could read about this and realize that it wasn't something just odd that had happened to me, something that was very uncomfortable in some ways, although also pleasant in some ways. And I don't think it's that unusual, actually, for people to have this kind of beginner's experience in that way. And sometimes it takes them years to sort it out. But I think that anyone who practices meditation, practices mindfulness meditation, at some point can experience a deepening experience of emptiness. And hopefully, if you have a whole system of practices to hand, like the Metta Bhavana and body awareness and just sitting, the experience won't be quite as uncomfortable as mine. At least I hope so. So part of my putting things together was also I met Saccacitta. This was about a few years after I'd started meditating. I wanted to be a mitra, and I went to a retreat in Germany where he was, and I just happened to sit next to him on the dinner table, and we just exchanged a few words, just greetings, really. And because I didn't get into any kind of dialogue with him, I could get more of a kind of a felt sense. And what I remember is that I felt like I was sitting on the edge of a cliff, like a huge space that just sort of went off into the distance. And that sense of spaciousness, I also got from other Buddhist teachers around that time, because at that time, to be a mitra, you were sort of asked not to shop around, or rather, so that you could make a certain commitment. So I thought, well, if I'm not going to shop around, I better do my shopping around before. And so I did. I went along in Amsterdam. It was one of the places that people would come, and I did meet some other Buddhists, and some of them had that same impact on me, that I could just feel that kind of spaciousness. And so it was through those experiences and studying Buddhism that I realized it wasn't just some kind of anomaly, that kind of this empty space was part of what Buddhism was about. And in fact, it wasn't just something that you'd stumble into sort of accidentally and then be a bit alarmed about it, but and then feel like you were fast asleep. But actually, it can be a lived experience. And in fact, the people who live that experience are very much awake. The Buddha is said to be the awakened one. Okay, so speaking of Buddhist, Triratna is of course ancient, but it has evolved and it's become quite complex, and it's known by a lot of names. It's translated. So the Sanskrit word is shunyata. There's also a Pali, which is supposedly an older language. So it's often translated as emptiness. But in some ways, in terms of your experience, another translation is open dimension of being. So open dimension of being. I'll mention that a bit, because in some ways that fits how it feels to the person. There's also a natural state of mind, Buddha nature, primordial awareness. So all these things have a slightly different meaning, and they're kind of different focus. That's why people make a word, and there's said to be different types of shunyata. And apparently the Tibetans love discussing all these things. So we can make this very complicated, or we don't need to. I think it's more a case of we should be open to emptiness, and emptiness can deepen and become more of a lived experience for us. And so it definitely helps for us to be familiar with Buddhist teachings, just because, you know, if we have an experience we didn't expect or we didn't plan, that we can sort of fit it in. Saccacitta is given a great talk on this called The Mystery of the Void. And it's available on, Free Buddhist Audio, and I really recommend it. It's a cracking talk. Yeah. And I'd like to be able to say more about it one day, but for now, this is meditation practice. So let's just then focus on what we're going to do today. So these evenings break into two parts. So we've got this first hour, then we have a short break for 10 minutes when the YouTube people leave, and then we have another half hour. So those two parts, I will kind of focus on, I'd like to bring shunyata, the Buddhist teaching of shunyata, to the fore in our practice. And the two emphases that I'm going to bring in are to do with kind of the two ways we can mistake shunyata, or mistake our understanding of what shunyata is, or Buddha nature, to use a term which is maybe what I'm trying to get to here, because this is quite a traditional way of seeing how we tend to mistake what the Buddha is, or our Buddha nature, right? So the first is to think of the Buddha as a kind of a supreme being, sort of the perfection of love, perfection of meditation, wisdom, psychic power, beyond space and time. I'm sure you've heard of all of these. And so with this misunderstanding, we will have a kind of a favorite idea or image of the Buddha that we have faith in. So we reify the Buddha, right? We make something that maybe can't be pinned down. We pin it down a little bit too much. Bodhisattvas and teachers, we can do the same. So that's one kind of trend. The other trend is to misunderstand in a nihilistic way. Okay, so we think of the Buddha nature as the absence of things. So maybe minus all the failings that we feel that we lack. So Buddha, if you're a Buddha, you have no uncontrolled thoughts, you have no anxiety, you have no selfish desires, you have no frustration, anger, no self, that sort of thing, right? So with this misunderstanding, our path tends to be one of trying to withdraw, right? So we try to withdraw from life and be very spiritual. We maybe refer to the Heart Sutra as the ultimate truth, because it challenges any kind of particular formulation of the path. You know, there's no I, ear, nose, no ignorance, or the end of it. So I don't mean to sort of shame people here. It's said to be this is inevitable, right? And in fact, we tend to flip from one to the other. We think of the Buddha as a kind of a god, supreme being, or sometimes think emptiness, nothing, none of these faults that I have. So it's inevitable. So we need to be kind with ourselves when we notice that we're falling into one of these. But there are things we can do to help. So one of the things we can do is balance our efforts. And our puja is an example. So in the puja, we quite explicitly, you know, we speak of the Buddha, we speak to the Buddha, we chant mantras, we'll have images, we'll have a shrine. And then to, sorry, the neighbors, we are at home here. So, but to prevent going too much in reification, we also recite the Heart Sutra. Okay, so we've got that balance there in our puja. And that's the kind of approach I want to do here. So we'll start off, in fact, I will recite the Heart Sutra, then we'll go into a practice of the mindfulness of breathing, which I will guide, give some ideas related to emptiness, shunyata. Then we'll have a break. And then we'll have a second period where we're going to be more of the reification type thing, where the shunyata is often reified as blue sky. Okay. And I'll also be chanting a shunyata mantra. So that's the structure we've got for today or this evening. So before we all settle down and get ready for some practice, I just want to make a final point. So what we can also do in terms of these two types of misunderstanding that we can get into is to realize that both these misunderstandings, so seeing the Buddha as a supreme being, that's countless lifetimes, you know, if I keep doing practice over many lifetimes, eventually one day I'll be a bodhisattva or something. That's not particularly helpful, in my opinion. And neither is the approach of trying to be endlessly spiritual, trying to improve your lifestyle all the time. Instead, and again, this is quite traditional, focus on right now. Okay, right now in your situation, the conditions are not perfect. You know, we're not in a monastery, we're not in a retreat center, we're not on the top of a mountain, but right now is really where we can work very effectively. So aim your efforts for right now. Don't try to get the conditions right. Aim for right now. Okay, so that's all I've got to say. Quite a lot, I think. Hope that was okay. And so we can settle down then to some practice. And like I said, I'm going to start off with the Heart Sutra. I've got a little bell this week. So that's our sign for the different stages. And I'll just get it up so I can actually see what I'm reading, because it's suddenly gone quite dark. Okay, so we'll have the mindfulness of breathing started with the Heart Sutra. You can chant it yourself if you like, if you remember it, or you can just listen to me reading it. The Bodhisattva of compassion, when he meditated deeply, saw the emptiness of all five skandhas and sundered the bonds that caused him suffering. Here then, form is no other than emptiness. Emptiness no other than form. Form is only emptiness. Emptiness only form. Feeling, thought, and choice, consciousness itself, are the same as this. All things are by nature void. They are not born or destroyed, nor are they stained or pure, nor do they wax or wane. So, in emptiness, no form, no feeling, thought, or choice, nor is there consciousness, no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind, no color, sound, smell, taste, touch, or what the mind takes hold of, nor even act of sensing. No ignorance or end of it, nor all that comes of ignorance. No withering, no death, no end of them. Nor is there pain or cause of pain, or cease in pain, or noble path to lead from pain. Not even wisdom to attain. Attainment too is emptiness. So know that the Bodhisattva, holding to nothing whatever, but dwelling in prajna wisdom, is freed of delusive hindrance, rid of the fear bred by it, and reaches clearest nirvana. All Buddhas of past and present, Buddhas of future time, using this prajna wisdom, come to full and perfect vision. Hear then the great Dharani, the radiant peerless mantra, prajna paramita, whose words allay all pain. Hear and believe its truth. Gate gate paragate, parangate bodhi swaha. Gate gate pare, parasamgate bodhi swaha. Gate gate paragate, parasamgate bodhi swaha. Okay, so as we move into meditation, we'll begin with the body scan. Begin at the toes. So maybe just move your toes, heighten the awareness. And then up to the feet and the ankles. All the time you can do little movements, just flexing that part of the body. And up the legs, feeling the muscles. See if you can relax the muscles of the legs. You probably need that to keep your posture to a certain extent. And then up to your hips and your bottom, so feel your weight being supported. We're just relaxing your hip joints. You can sort of imaginatively go right down into the joint. Just relaxing the muscles around the hip joint. And from there, we just straighten up the back, nice and long. We run our attention right up the back, up between the ribs, up between the shoulder blades. So maybe just roll your shoulders a bit and just get rid of any tension. And just feel any tension dropping away down the arms, past the elbows, down the forearms, out of the fingers. And just coming back up the arms, up to the neck. So again, if you just can roll the neck a bit, you can do this very slowly. Just releasing any holding. And then just allowing the head to find its natural point of balance. And once you have that balance, you can just move your head slightly to the left and the right, just almost imperceptibly. You can just feel straight away, same backwards and forwards, that you're not quite at the point of balance. So that's quite a sharp, exquisite sense we have of balance. So we move up to the top of the head. And then down the face, so relaxing the eyes, relaxing the cheeks, relaxing the lips and the tongue. And we allow the focus to move down past the throat, down past the chest to the tummy. I just pause there and just notice any sensation, allowing any relaxation to increase. Maybe let the breath soften the tummy. And further down, the navel to a point just below the navel. And we just rest our attention there. Okay, so starting the mindfulness of breathing. So in the first stage, we're counting 1 to 10 on the incoming breath. you might be wondering, I think we usually teach it on the outgoing breath, but I think of the first and second stages as quite interchangeable. And the reason is, as I'll explain, so what we're striving for in the first two stages is to allow the breath to move freely. So in the world, sometimes the world is very threatening, quite an unfriendly place. So we'll naturally put barriers to protect ourselves. And this is reflect sometimes in the breath, so we don't breathe in freely because we're cautious of what might be coming in. But we're in meditation where it's safe, so we can try to relax that. So we just breathe in freely as we count. So in this way, as we're focusing on the in-breath, really try to savor that, really enjoy the breath coming in, really allow it to fill our lungs. So we're not holding back, we're not pushing it, we're not cautious about breathing in something that's not good for us. Just breathe it in. Okay, so that's the end of our first stage. So maybe just check your posture, that you're sitting comfortably and relaxed. As we move into the second stage, which we'll now do, where the focus is our out breath. And we'll use a count that sort of heightens the attention. So again here, we're looking for a free out breath. In our lives, it's sometimes quite hard to express ourselves. We live in a society that's very complicated, very complex. You can't always be honest, truthful. We have to be quite guarded, perhaps, in our opinions. So this can manifest in our breath, where we're a bit cautious and we're a bit constrained. But again, in the safety of meditation, we can really just let go, breathe out fully, breathe out into the world fearlessly. So as our out breath begins to free up, we can just think of it as unlimited resource. We can breathe out and give. The third stage, we won't use any counting. We just allow the breath to flow smoothly in and out, in harmony. So in whichever way you do the first two stages, we focused on the out breath, we focused on the in breath. And now we can balance the two. Both are free. Maybe our mind is stabilized a bit, less chasing after every thought. So we can relax a bit more, just enjoy the movement of the breath flowing in and out freely and openly, unguarded. Okay, and then we move to the final stage where the instruction is to notice a point where the breath enters the body and leaves the body. In some ways, I always think of this as a bit slightly an enigma because we've sort of had the freedom of dropping the count and then we're tightening up again. And I think this is because there's not enough just openness in our meditation. So the point is there, just if your mind starts to wander, just come back. It's just very light, very subtle. But if your mind is stable and not wandering, you can just be very, very light in any attention, and we just be relaxed and open. as much as we can. We've done the work of the first stages. So we just very lightly hold the breath. So we remain open and relaxed. Just allow the breath to come and go freely. Okay, so that's the end of the first half. So we generally have a little break, and so I make it 5-2. Shall we have a 10-minute break, and I'll get started at 8:05 sharp.